Incredible revelation. The Black Maid's unexpected warning saves Billionaire from a hidden threat. Daniel Carter stood in the expansive lobby of his estate, sunlight streaming through the massive windows. Wealth glimmered around him, designer furniture, exquisite artwork, and gadgets that screamed cutting-edge technology. Yet, inside, he felt a storm brewing. The anticipation of his product launch loomed ahead like an abyss. Would it lift him to new heights or plunge him into chaos? He was a titan in a tech world that was unforgiving and fiercely competitive. The scrupulous language of boardroom politics vibrated in the air, and ears everywhere were listening, ready to strike. As the days evaporated like morning mist, Daniel grappled with unwelcome insecurities. The whispers of industry enmity echoed in the back of his mind. Was he really on solid ground? Or was he simply a mask, a fragile facade about to crumble under the weight of expectation? The pressure suffocated him. He had built his empire on innovation, yet the gnawing fear of betrayal haunted him. One rainy afternoon, while dusting shelves in the library, Evelyn, the dedicated maid, overheard two corporate executives in hushed tones, plotting treachery. Her heart sank. Could what she'd heard, disgraceful intentions masked by calculated smiles, really be true? What would she do with this haunting knowledge? Loyalty to Daniel tugged at her heartstrings, yet fear for her job loomed larger. Would he even listen to her? Evelyn watched Daniel transition from a vibrant leader to a man ravaged by tension. His laughter had faded, replaced by a furrowed brow, a body taut with apprehension. The walls of their home, once filled with lively chatter, now resonated with an unspoken urgency. She admired him, the man who had embraced her family, yet in this crucial moment, he seemed oblivious to the growing danger. Could she risk speaking up? Doubt gripped her. What would befall her if she did? Before she could dismiss her pulsating worry, she stepped forward, setting her sights on Daniel. He looked up at her with that familiar, comforting gaze, but today it flickered with impatience. "Evelyn, everything's under control," he reassured, patting her shoulder lightly. But beneath that trust lay his racing mind, an internal battle waged against an unseen enemy. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the days zipped by, each tick of the clock amplified Evelyn's unease. She witnessed Daniel's hands tremble slightly as he reviewed the presentation one last time. Was he prepared for the storm just waiting to break? Something inside her twisted painfully. The presentation was more than just about technology. It represented familial trust, visions turned into reality, and her unwavering loyalty. Approaching the launch, Daniel's very foundation threatened to buckle under veiled treachery. If he only paused to seek counsel, to listen to the whispers often disregarded, could he avert the looming disaster? In that penetrating moment, she knew she had to act. As the clock struck the precipice of the launch, came the realization. Could Daniel decipher who his real allies were before he stood exposed, vulnerable, ready to be struck? Tension coiled in the air as hearts raced. Would he unravel the truth before it was too late? The days leading up to the launch felt like a tightening noose around Daniel's neck. Each morning, he awakened to the same gnawing anxiety, the specter of betrayal lurking at the edges of his consciousness. Days turned into nights, coffee transformed into a lifeline. But clarity remained elusive. The messages he received from trusted advisors felt increasingly hollow. The dynamic of their conversations had shifted, filled with ambiguous reassurances that only deepened his doubts. Evelyn's disquiet, meanwhile, escalated alongside his own. She often caught herself lost in thought, the chilling implications of what she had overheard refusing to let her rest. There lay a fragile barrier between loyalty and self-preservation, and each day it seemed to waver. The moment she decided to step forward felt as momentous as the launch itself. Still, the creeping fear of dismissal lingered. How could she, a mere maid, presume to steer the fate of such a colossal enterprise? Amidst the din of impending chaos, Daniel found himself yearning for connection. He called for Evelyn one evening, needing an anchor to ground himself. It was rare for him to seek assistance from someone who occupied the peripheries of his life, but today a flicker of something impelled him forward. "Evelyn," he began, his voice steadier than he felt. "I've been thinking about the atmosphere around here, and it feels uncertain." Evelyn's heart raced, not only from the sudden urgency in his voice, but from the opportunity that hovered before her. This could be her moment to protect not only herself, but the man she respected deeply. She hesitated, caught in the delicate web of what she knew and what she feared to share. "Sir, well, there are whispers." Her voice trembled slightly, fear entwined with urgency. Daniel leaned in, eyes sharpening, betraying an awareness that something pivotal was unwinding. "You can't hold back, Evelyn. If something's wrong, I need to know." In that charged moment of vulnerability, Evelyn felt an unassuming strength stir within her. She took a deep breath, the truth clamoring to escape, and shared what she'd overheard. The names of the executives, the plots they'd voiced sinisterly beneath veils of camaraderie, echoed like a siren call between them. Daniel's expression hardened, the weight of her words settling like a tangible force. "You're certain of this?" he pressed, the tension twisting into resolve. "Yes, sir. They spoke of sabotage, framing you to seize control. I couldn't stay silent." Each word imbued with her earnest intent, she realized this was more than simple loyalty. It was a plea to recognize the fragile lines of trust woven into their lives. A complex tangle of emotions warred within Daniel. Relief mingled with betrayal, the pain of knowing he had not fully grasped the dynamics at play. Yet, in Evelyn's revelation lay a profound truth. He was not as alone in this treacherous game as he had believed. "Thank you," he said, his voice now low but steady. "I need your help. We have to prepare for their move." Evelyn's heart surged with determination, finding unexpected clarity in her role. Together they began to form a strategy against the unseen enemies lurking in boardroom shadows. It was time to reshape the narrative, to bend the power structure that sought to unravel what they had built. As they mapped out contingencies, a newfound resolve tethered them, to protect the integrity of what they had created. However, treachery is often met with layers of deception. Would their combined efforts hold fast against the storm? The enemy was not yet in sight, but Daniel felt a chilling sense that the launch was merely the beginning of a much darker conflict. "Let's expose the truth before it can destroy us," Daniel asserted, locking eyes with Evelyn, a shared purpose igniting between them. Yet the unspoken question loomed large. Were they truly ready to confront their adversaries head-on, or did the threat burrow deeper than any of them suspected? As the day of the launch approached, their alliance would soon be tested in the most unimaginable way. Time was running out, and the stakes felt more perilous than ever. The path ahead was dangerous, but together they had a chance to reclaim what was rightfully theirs. Would they emerge victorious, or would the shadows consume them both? The urgency in Daniel's mind pulsed relentlessly, his thoughts racing to find a thread of strategy amidst the turmoil. The clock was ticking, and the date of the launch loomed like an unfinished novel steeped in foreboding. They had weighty obstacles ahead, and the long-buried fears were not merely ghosts that haunted. They were living, breathing entities eager to strike. He had to think fast. "Evelyn," he began with newfound conviction, "we need to establish a network, a way to gather information without arousing suspicion." The tension in the air morphed into palpable energy, urging him forward. The realization that he couldn't rely entirely on the men and women he once viewed as allies seeded doubt in his core. Evelyn nodded firmly. I can help with that. I know my way through the hallways and the back channels. Those who think they are above me often forget that I see everything. They don't see me as a threat. Her declaration was surprising, yet invigoration surged through Daniel at her newfound confidence. Good, he replied, a trace of admiration threading through his words. We need to exploit your access. Arrange a meeting, get them talking. I want to know their weaknesses. This isn't just about the launch anymore. It's about saving ourselves. As days passed, a rhythm developed between them, a synchronized dance of strategy and determination. They dissected alliances and plotted moves like a chess game, the stakes higher than any corporate rivalry he had ever faced. Daniel marveled at how Evelyn transformed from a background figure into a pivotal ally. He witnessed her eyes grow sharper each day, her movements more assured. It served as a stark reminder that everyone held power, albeit in different forms. Daniel's professional world began to peel away its veneer, revealing glaring contradictions that left an acrid taste in his mouth. He wore a mask of confidence framed by ambition. But deep down, he began to question the moral weight associated with his own climb. Had he willingly overlooked the ethical implications of ruthless competition? The thought gnawed at him. A whisper of unease curled in the corner of his mind. Yet, Evelyn's steadfastness ignited in him a raw determination. Reflecting on her courage to reveal the truth, he questioned his own vulnerabilities. Who was he if he allowed fear to dictate his decisions? I need to stand tall, not only for my sake, but for her as well, he thought. The lines of loyalty were no longer clear-cut. They were woven with both ambition and compelling integrity. Their clandestine operations began yielding results. Subtle changes in communication patterns among key executives pointed to growing dissent. Each revelation created ripples, advancing the sense of urgency that now coursed through the office. They needed to act before their adversaries drew the noose tighter. One evening, amidst a quiet storm of thoughts, Daniel and Evelyn huddled over a map of their upcoming launch event. They traced out contingencies, steeped in the anxiety of impending betrayal, but emboldened by the weight of preparation. He turned to her and asked, "What do you believe is most important to focus on, Evelyn?" Her immediate response was laden with both clarity and unconscious wisdom. The hearts and minds of those who support you, those who still believe in the vision, that's where your strength lies. Her insight resonated deeply. He felt a powerful shift within him as he recognized that leadership transcended mere authority. It was connectivity woven with authenticity, a realization that allowed his resolve to crystallize. However, just as they began to sense the first glimmer of advantage, a message arrived that would shatter their momentum. A rival company was preparing a move that threatened not just their launch, but Daniel's position altogether. The realization that they were racing against a clock embedded with treachery was sobering. Evelyn's gaze met his. Uncertainty mingled with the flame of determination. This was always going to be risky. Are we ready for this confrontation? The chilling prompt echoed like a bell tolling in silent anticipation. Daniel took a deep breath, feeling the weight of both fear and excitement. The time is coming for us to confront them, and we must choose our next step carefully. As the ink on their plans barely dried, a deeper sense of dread lingered. Daniel knew they had entered a game that could take them to the brink of destruction, and with each heartbeat, the danger grew nearer, more palpable. What he didn't realize was that Evelyn harbored a secret of her own, one that could alter everything they had worked for. When the time came, would loyalty still stand? Or would the tides of circumstance wash it away like sand? As dawn broke, a muted light bled through the blinds of Daniel's office, offering an eerie calm that belied the chaos brewing within. He stared at the documents sprawled across his desk, feeling the weight of every strategic choice crystallize into a singular mission. yet the growing tension in his mind was anything but tranquil. "Evelyn, we need to be proactive," he said, poring over the intel they had gathered. The uncertainty from last night's revelations hovered over him like a thundercloud, demanding he address it directly. "I want us to consider our options for countering their moves. We can't wait for them to act first." "Absolutely," she agreed, her voice sharp with determination. "We should set traps of misinformation, divert their attention when the time is right." The fire in her words encouraged Daniel, energizing the air around them. Yet a flicker of doubt remained, gnawing at the back of his mind. Could he truly trust her insights? Each day brought her closer to his intentions, and with it, personal revelations that weighed heavily on him. Evelyn had become a source of strength, yet he sensed that beneath her surface, confidence lay a tumult that mirrored his own. As Daniel paced, he reflected on the nature of their growing partnership. It was more than mere strategy. It was a dance on the razor's edge between vulnerability and ambition. He found himself drawn to her resilience and the way she asserted her place in their increasingly hostile environment. "I underestimated how powerful knowledge can be," he confessed, his voice a low murmur. "You've helped me see that everyone can wield influence. I've been stuck in a mindset that sees power only as authority. Yes, but power built on connections will always be fleeting unless it's grounded in truth," she replied. The clarity in her understanding struck him, and he felt a shift take place within his own mindset. What if he allowed fear to inform his decisions? The mere consideration of exploiting their adversaries felt hollow and wrong now that he had recognized this truth. The moments turned heavy with silence as they contemplated their next actions. He was left to wrestle with the ethical implications. Would choosing ruthlessness guarantee him more than a fleeting victory? He fought against the instinct to suppress these queries, hoping that this internal conflict would lead him toward a clearer understanding of his own character. Breaking free from the cauldron of worry, he turned to Evelyn. "We need to connect with those who still believe in our vision. They're our best chance for solidifying support." It was a complete rediscovery of his mission, a chance to turn fear into loyalty. "We need to gauge where their confidence falters," she suggested. "Once we know that, we can rally support around solid, authentic arguments." As they assembled their core believers, Daniel felt a weight lift. Each conversation shifted away from self-preservation and toward a larger narrative. It was exhilarating, almost revolutionary in its understated way. But before they could act, a notification flashed on Daniel's screen, a ping of urgency that shattered the budding sense of direction. A name flickered in sharp clarity as he read the chilling message: ARC Industries. They were set to launch a campaign undermining everything Daniel had painstakingly built. Panic threatened to drain all resolve, but he channeled it into clarity. He could no longer afford to act from a place of fear. "We need to counter this immediately. They'll capitalize on our weaknesses," he announced, the tension in his voice matched only by the pulse of determination in his heart. But as Daniel plotted their retaliation, an insistent voice in his mind wondered what dark secrets Evelyn had not yet revealed. The tension of their collaboration shifted from anticipation to uncertainty. Had her confidence masked hidden motives? He turned to her, ready to confront the layering of trust and doubt. "Evelyn, I need you to be completely honest. If there's anything you haven't shared, now is the time." The room was heavy with expectation, Daniel's heart racing in the grip of tension. Would his next move dismantle the fragile alliance they had built, or would it pave the way for a deeper connection forged in honesty? The stakes had never been higher, and as the clock continued its relentless countdown, he sensed they were on the precipice of a revelation that could change everything. Evelyn shifted slightly, the weight of Daniel's question hanging between them. The flickering fluorescent lights above cast shadows across her features, illuminating a moment of hesitation that spoke louder than words ever could. Daniel felt a pang of apprehension. Had their partnership been limited to surface-level exchanges, or was it about to plunge into the depths of vulnerability? I've been parsing my thoughts," she began, her voice laced with caution. And maybe I haven't been fully transparent. There are elements at play that I'm not sure you're entirely aware of. What do you mean? The urgency in his tone sliced through the air. A few months ago, I overheard a conversation in ARC Industries. She continued, gripping the edge of the desk as if it was her anchor. They're not merely launching a campaign. They're working on something bigger, more systemic. Strategically, it targets not just our resources, but the very foundations of our trust and alliances. A chill ran down Daniel's spine. What kind of something? They're planning to discredit you personally, portraying you as someone who's untrustworthy and manipulative. We've touched on it vaguely, but they've found the chinks in your armor to exploit. Evelyn's voice barely concealed the weight of urgency, and he could see the storm brewing in her eyes. Daniel leaned back, reeling. This was no longer just about structural integrity or market share. This was personal. His heartbeat quickened, illuminating the stark vulnerability of his current situation. And what evidence do they have? That's the insidious part, she replied, her brow furrowing. They've woven together whispers of discontent from previous failures, attaching emotional narratives to facts. If we don't act preemptively, this narrative will solidify, and it'll be almost impossible to dismantle. The realization hit him like a truck. He stood on the battlefield of perception, each misstep guiding his soldiers, but also painting him as a pariah. He couldn't allow this to happen, not after sacrificing so much for his vision. So, we need to neutralize this threat while galvanizing our base, he strategized, the uncertainty morphing into determination. Evelyn nodded, her face now set. Exactly. But we can't just respond. We'll need a multi-layered approach. We should initiate dialogues that expose their motives and rally support behind you, rebuilding trust from the ground up. As they delved deeper into their plans, Daniel felt his confidence begin to rise again. He wasn't merely reacting anymore. He was reclaiming the narrative. But a lingering unease remained, a whisper at the back of his mind that raised questions about Evelyn's motives. Was this the real Evelyn, or a version shaped by the revelations around them? Evelyn, he said, barely able to contain the urgency tinged with doubt that colored his tone. If they're prepared to tear me down, what other tactics might they use? What should I be on the lookout for? Her eyes bore into his, fortifying their connection in this storm of chaos. Reputation isn't built in a vacuum. Be wary of those who seem too eager to turn others against you. You attract both allies and enemies by simply standing your ground. With her words echoing in his mind, he envisioned an intricate web of alliances forming and dissolving around him. Trust was both his greatest asset and most vulnerable point. He would need to navigate this landscape with precision and intelligence. The ominous ticking of the clock served as a reminder of the urgency of their next steps. Let's work on crafting a narrative that not only defends against theirs, but redefines who I am in this industry, he declared, his determination solidifying. The door creaked open, interrupting their focused energy. One of their key allies arrived, a whispered promise of courage amid the tension. As Daniel exchanged a glance with Evelyn, the weight of unspoken words hung between them, thick with implications. Daniel, she said softly, as if sensing the shift in their dynamic. This might be the moment where our partnership either solidifies or fractures. Are you ready to proceed not just with strategy, but with absolute honesty? His heart hammered as he recognized the intensity of the crossroads they faced. Perhaps the revelation they had both been building toward wasn't merely about outside threats. It was a personal reckoning as well. The time had come to face not just ARC Industries, but the shadows lurking within their own alliance. As he prepared to confront the reality of their strengths and weaknesses, Daniel knew that the outcome would ultimately redefine everything he believed about trust, loyalty, and leadership. The atmosphere in the room crackled with unsteady energy as Daniel and Evelyn resumed their discussion, the door now closed against the outside world. Daniel felt an acute sense of urgency wash over him. This was no longer a boardroom battle. It was a personal crusade. He couldn't afford to ignore the implications of Evelyn's revelations, not when the stakes had escalated to such dramatic heights. "Let's map it out," Daniel insisted, his voice firm. He pulled a notepad closer, the blank pages awaiting the weight of his thoughts. "What are the first steps to reclaiming control? We need to act quickly, but we must be smart." Evelyn leaned in, her eyes narrowing as she absorbed his intensity. "We should start with our key allies. We need to strengthen those relationships, make them aware of the narrative ARC is trying to construct. And we must share our own vision. If they can see the authenticity of your intent, we'll turn potential adversaries into staunch allies." His mind raced, sifting through the connections that tangled through their organization. It was a complex web, but at that moment, Daniel felt a spark of determination flickering within him. "Let's call a meeting this week. Focus on collaboration and transparency. I want them to see that we're anticipating ARC's moves, demonstrating that we are not just playing defense." As the strategy began to crystallize, he envisioned past incidents where he had faltered, moments when doubt had almost overwhelmed him. Each one had chipped away at his confidence, and now he recognized that the true battle lay in his own perception of self. He had to confront not only external threats, but also the internal fears that had haunted him for too long. Evelyn's voice snapped him back to the present. "We can also use social media strategically, not just to defend, but to showcase your successes, your passion. Authenticity matters. They may paint you as manipulative, but we can highlight your commitment to the industry, create dialogues that humanize your journey." He nodded, beginning to internalize her insights. The picture was becoming clearer. Still, doubt bubbled beneath the surface. What if his past mistakes had indeed set a precedent? But what if they don't believe me? What if they only see the failures? Evelyn's patience shone through as she dismissed his worries. People respond to narratives rooted in emotion. You need to show vulnerability, the truth of your journey. That's where your strength lies. Even in failure, there's power. Daniel felt a glimmer of hope. Embracing his failures could be the antidote to the toxic narrative emerging from ARC. "You're right. I need to shift my focus from trying to erase my past to framing it as part of my evolution as a leader, as a person. It may resonate more than a polished facade." As they forged ahead, a newfound camaraderie formed between them. He began to see Evelyn not just as a partner, but as a mirror reflecting possibilities and challenges back to him. This collaboration was sharpening his resolve, coaxing out deeper layers of his professional identity. Yet, as they developed strategies, an unease knotted inside him. Was Evelyn's support truly rooted in shared goals, or was there a hidden agenda? He weighed the prospect of confronting her, risking their alliance for the sake of clarity. But the cost of uncertainty was too great to ignore. "I need to ask you something, Evelyn," he said, halting mid-sentence. "Are you with me on this journey wholeheartedly? I have to know." Her gaze flickered, the intensity deepening as she considered his question. Daniel braced himself for her answer, the echo of tension resounding in the air between them. One that could either fortify their alliance or unravel it altogether. In that moment, he understood this confrontation was equally about personal trust and professional integrity. The consequences of his choices were unfolding, revealing not just who he was capable of becoming, but also demanding clarity on whom he could trust in this battle. The door creaked open again, and another ally entered, their presence shifting the dynamics once more. Time was slipping away, and with it, the opportunity to cement alliances and confront uncertainties. As Daniel prepared for the inevitable twists ahead, he wondered, was honesty the path to strength, or could it lead to something more dangerous, a crumbling of foundations he had only just begun to build? Daniel felt the air thicken as Claire, the new ally he had brought in to support the efforts, entered the room. Her expression mirrored the tension simmering inside him, and he could see she sensed the weight of the conversation that had just unfolded. "Did I interrupt something?" she asked, her voice a mix of curiosity and caution. Daniel exchanged a glance with Evelyn, who offered him a reassuring nod. It was a sign they were still in this together, but uncertainty loomed like a shadow. "Not at all, Claire," he replied, adopting a calm demeanor that belied the chaos unfolding within. "Good," she smiled, but he could tell she was quickly assessing the situation. "I have some insights regarding our upcoming meeting." "Insights?" Daniel's interest peaked, distraction momentarily banishing his doubts. "Let's hear it." Claire took a moment, collecting her thoughts, then leaned forward. "I've done some digging on ARC's most recent communications with our partners. They're pushing a narrative that I believe we can counter. If we act quickly, we might turn it to our advantage." As she spoke, Daniel's analytical mind latched onto her words. It was just the opening he needed. "This could pivot how we engage our allies. What do you suggest?" Claire unfolded the details of ARC's strategy, mapping out their communication patterns, and Daniel listened intently. With every point she made, he could feel the semblance of control returning to him. He was seeing pathways emerge where he had only glimpsed confusion. "Evelyn and I were just discussing the importance of authenticity in our story. Can we weave that into this counter-narrative?" Daniel questioned, eager to create a cohesive response. "Absolutely," Claire replied with a nod. "Your journey, your experience with setbacks, can actually humanize the brand. People resonate with stories of strength built upon adversity. We need to amplify that." The idea ignited something within him. Daniel had been shackled by his past. He had let fear whisper lies into his ear. But now, he could see the potential not only to reclaim his narrative but to use it as a powerful tool. "Let's draft a plan that combines personal storytelling with focused outreach." As they continued brainstorming, Daniel's confidence grew. Each collaboration was a stepping stone, not only to regain footing in his professional landscape, but to uplift his own self-image. He could almost feel the old Daniel, the one weighed down by self-doubt, slipping away as he embraced this new trajectory. Evelyn watched him closely, perhaps recognizing the shift in his posture, in the fierce glint of determination growing in his eyes. Yet, even amidst the rush of newfound purpose, a nagging fear remained. He wondered if Evelyn was genuinely on board, or if she ultimately sought to leverage his recovery for her own gains, echoing the mistrust he had buried earlier. "Claire, when can we implement this?" he asked, pressing his ambition forward. "Let's get something in place by next week. We'll need drafts ready for our meeting with partners," she replied confidently. "Agreed. Let's move with intent." As they finalized their tactics, Daniel felt a flicker of enthusiasm, but the nagging thought of Evelyn's true intentions lingered. He resolved to confront her again, not with suspicion, but to fortify the alliance he had begun to build. On an impulse, he turned to her. "We need to be forthright in our communication. Don't you agree?" Evelyn's expression hardened, her gaze unwavering. "Indeed. Authenticity matters, Daniel, but it's how we define that authenticity together that will make or break us." Her words sliced through the air, escalating the tension once more. Just as Daniel prepared to delve deeper into this discussion, the phone rang. The tone shattered the atmosphere, and a wave of urgency washed over him again. Who was on the other end, and what news awaited? In that moment, Daniel felt the familiar pull of fear. What if an unexpected threat was waiting to unravel everything he had just begun to build? Daniel felt the cold grip of anxiety as the ringing phone reverberated off the walls. He glanced at Evelyn, whose tense expression mirrored his own. Time seemed to freeze, and the weight of the impending conversation pressed heavily on his chest. "Answer it," Claire urged, breaking the tension. Daniel struggled for a moment before reaching for the phone with tentative fingers. "Hello?" he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "Daniel, it's Keith," came the raspy voice of his business partner, laced with urgency. "We need to talk. Something's come up concerning ARC's latest move, and it involves you." A rush of adrenaline shot through Daniel as he processed the words. What do you mean by something involving me? The uncertainty threatened to drown out his excitement. The fresh momentum Claire had instilled was now teetering on the edge of chaos. Meet me at the old warehouse on 5th in 30 minutes. This isn't something we can discuss over the phone. The line went dead before Daniel could respond. He lowered the phone, the realization of what was happening beginning to settle in. Evelyn's piercing gaze weighed heavily upon him. What did Keith say? There's more happening with Ark than we thought. Something that puts me in the crosshairs, he replied, tension unmistakably creeping into his voice. In that instant, he felt a mixture of dread and determination intertwining within him. It was all too evident now. This was the critical juncture he had both feared and anticipated. He could either allow the situation to ensnare him like a trap, or adapt, to confront it with the same tenacity he'd recently begun to cultivate. Claire, he said, urgency propelling him forward. We have to act fast. Ark might be trying to undermine us even before we make our move. We need to prepare for every angle. Then let's brainstorm, Claire said, her energy igniting as she leaned into the challenge. What do we already know about their tactics? What's their motive? As they delved into strategizing, Daniel's mind began to race. There was a flickering ember of newfound resilience that had begun to course through him. The fear of the unknown, once paralyzing, now seemed like an invitation to confront adversity head-on. Evelyn's eyes were still fixed on him, her expression inscrutable. We need to consider every possibility. If Keith is right, this could leverage everything we're building, she said, breaking through his spiral of thought. They might see your success as a threat. Exactly, Daniel replied, his determination gaining strength. We can't let them dictate the narrative anymore. As they spoke, a revelation struck Daniel. He had always viewed conflict through a lens of trepidation, but now he sensed an opportunity. He could turn his vulnerability into a narrative tool, one that exposed Ark's vulnerabilities. I have an idea, he said, excitement building. What if we present a counter-narrative during the meeting that not only highlights my successes, but directly addresses the impending threats? We'll turn their attack into a catalyst for our growth. Claire nodded, impressed. That could give us the upper hand, Daniel. If you directly address the challenges, it shows resilience and confidence. Evelyn folded her arms, skepticism flaring again. But what if they use that against you, Daniel? You're exposing potential weaknesses. That sharp reprisal cut through the air like a knife. The uncertainty flickered again, but instead of retreating, he leaned into the challenge. I have to own my story, Evelyn. If I don't, someone else will try to write it for me. That's my truth, and they can't take it. Evelyn's expression softened, acknowledgement creeping into her resolve. Then we prepare for all outcomes. I'll start gathering intelligence on their next moves. We can't let them catch us off guard. As they transitioned from strategizing to executing, Daniel felt a shift within him. The layers of doubt that had once obscured his vision were peeling away, revealing a hunger for authenticity and unapologetic presence. The phone call had ignited something powerful, a recognition that this emerging conflict was less about survival and more about seizing control over his narrative. But as they plotted next steps, another shadow hovered at the edge of his thoughts. What if the incoming information splintered their alliance? How far would they go to secure their individual positions? It was a risk that threatened to pull everything apart. The stakes were rising, and so was Daniel's resolve. The moment of reckoning approached, and he was about to confront not just Ark, but the very people he was beginning to trust. Would it bring forth unity, or fracture everything he had fought for? Daniel paced the floor of the small conference room, the ticking clock amplifying the tension that hung in the air. Claire had stepped out to gather additional intel, leaving him alone with his thoughts, and those thoughts were a whirlpool of uncertainty. He replayed the conversation with Keith in his mind, the urgency of his partner's voice echoing like a warning bell. Meeting at the warehouse meant something substantial was afoot, It was time to confront the adversary lurking in the shadows. The flickering fluorescent lights above pulsed in rhythm with his racing heart. He could feel the weight of the choice he was about to make, and the potential consequences were as tangible as the walls around him. Daniel took a deep breath, focusing on the growing determination within. The image of himself cowering in the corner, a version of Daniel defined by fear and hesitation, was recoiling into a distant memory. It was time for proactive measures, not passive reactions. He found himself reflecting on everything he had learned during this tumultuous journey. His ability to navigate through chaos had sharpened. Questions circled in his mind. How could he leverage his growing influence? How could he ensure that he was seen as a formidable force, not merely a target? Suddenly the door swung open and Evelyn entered, her expression taut with urgency. "We need to discuss the potential angle ARC might take against you in the meeting," she said, sliding into her seat across from him. "They'll undoubtedly use your vulnerabilities against you, particularly if we present anything that hints at uncertainty." "Exactly," Daniel replied, committing to the momentum building in the room. "But we need to flip that script. Let's identify our strengths and prepare a defense." Evelyn leaned forward, her eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "What if we showcase not just your successes, but your willingness to tackle challenges head-on? Highlight the fact that every move they've made to undermine you is backfiring. You are not just a businessman. You're a leader." An unexpected wave of confidence surged within Daniel. It was refreshing to see the situation not as a defensive tactic, but as an offensive strategy. "We need to present data that supports our narrative, demonstrate growth in metrics, but also humanize the journey. I want them to see that our success wasn't just handed to us. We've earned it through resilience." Evelyn smiled for the first time, revealing a hint of trust in the direction he was taking. "That's the spirit, and we must prepare for their counterarguments. They'll likely question your track record under pressure. We need to anticipate their tactics." Daniel's mind began to race with possibilities. He tapped his fingers against the table, formulating a plan that would not just protect his legacy, but elevate it. "Let's create a presentation that juxtaposes our challenges with our achievements. We'll illustrate a narrative arc, the journey from adversity to strength that ARC neither understands nor values." As they worked through the details, excitement pulsed within him. In that moment, he grasped a profound truth about his evolving self. Vulnerability could fuel strength if wielded correctly. The darker aspects of his past were not weaknesses, they were testament to his growth. But the undercurrents of conflict remained. As the meeting neared, he could not shake the feeling that deep-rooted insecurities, not only from ARC, but also from those patting him on the back, lingered like shadows cast against a flickering light. "Let's run through the potential scenarios one last time," Evelyn suggested, practicality setting in as she sensed his unease. "What if they try to circumvent the points we plan to make?" he asked, revealing a crack in his newfound confidence. Evelyn met his gaze with an unyielding resolve. "Then we adapt, Daniel. We pivot. The world is unpredictable, and so must we be." Her words stirred something deep within him. It wasn't merely about preparing for the meeting. It was about preparing for the battle for his identity and respect. He realized the meeting was not just a confrontation with ARC, but a reckoning against self-doubt and their perceptions that had long dictated his actions. "Okay," he said, voice steadier than before. "Let's do this together and expose any hidden threats." But as they fine-tuned their strategy, a disquieting thought crept back. Would his allies remain steadfast when the confrontation became intense? Just how trustworthy were those around him? The hallway echoed with the sound of muffled footsteps, signaling that their moment was near. As he stood up to follow Evelyn, Daniel felt the weight of impending decisions. They were heading into unknown territory, where alliances could be tested and loyalties fractured. There was no turning back now, as the ticking clock signaled the hour of reckoning was upon them. Would this meeting fortify his resolve, or bring forth an unsettling revelation that shattered the fragile bonds he had forged? Daniel stood at the threshold of the conference room, a wave of determination washing over him. The atmosphere was electric, saturated with the weight of unspoken words and buried fears. Today was not simply about a product launch or market positioning. It was a personal confrontation of sorts, a test of his resilience, his integrity, and the authenticity he had fought so hard to reclaim. In the days leading up to this moment, he had transformed from a man shadowed by self-doubt into one who understood the power of vulnerability as a cornerstone of authentic leadership. Partnering with Evelyn had ignited something within him, a realization that alliances matter, not just in terms of business, but in the essence of who he was becoming. He could lead with courage because he had finally learned to trust not just himself, but those like Evelyn who had dared to step into the light of his struggle. Adjusting his tie, Daniel glanced at Evelyn, who stood beside him, a resolute force radiating confidence. She had proven time and again that her insights could turn the tide, and now her presence was a testament to their collective journey. "We've prepared for this, and I'm ready," he assured her, his voice steady and resolute. "Yes," she affirmed with a firm nod. "No matter what they throw at us, remember the strength we've built together." The door swung open, and they strode in, met by an assembly of executives and industry stalwarts, all of whom carried the air of scrutiny. The tension in the room crackled like static electricity. Daniel took his seat at the head of the table, the familiar surge of adrenaline coursing through him. "Our goal today is to lay out the facts," he began, channeling the strength he had harnessed over the past weeks. He sensed the skepticism emanating from some members of the opposing team, yet this time, it invigorated him rather than intimidated him. ARC Industries has chosen to disseminate half-truths and narratives aimed at discrediting our work. Instead of retaliating, we hereby welcome this opportunity to demonstrate the resilience woven into our very fabric. He illustrated his point with clarity, presenting data paired with personal stories of adversity and triumph, a tapestry that resonated with honesty. Each slide painted a picture of not just successes, but the learning forged through trials. The narrative was compelling, and Daniel could feel the room shifting. The tide of perception that had previously threatened him began to ebb. As he spoke, he realized he wasn't merely defending his work. He was reestablishing his legacy. The very act of vulnerability felt like shedding an old skin, the pretense of perfection replaced with an embrace of authenticity. He acknowledged failure as an integral part of his journey, the stepping stones that had led him to this pivotal moment. The tension broke when a voice interrupted. A key executive from RK called out with a sneer, "But you've stumbled more than once. How can we trust your capability?" A silence enveloped the room, and Daniel seized the moment. "My mistakes are not markers of failure. They are lessons. Every stumble has paved the way for our current success. I stand before you not merely as a businessman, but as a testament to the power of resilience. Trust is built through transparency, not wrapped in a veil of unattainable expectations." His voice was firm, fueled by the very doubts that had haunted him. A wave of recognition washed over some faces in the room, a respect he hadn't necessarily expected. At that moment, he didn't just see allies in the audience, but fellow human beings facing their own complexities. The discussion flowed, shifting from confrontation to collaboration as he encouraged open dialogue around the evolving industry landscape. One by one, hands were raised, questions exchanged, and as conversation erupted around the table, Daniel felt fear lift from his shoulders. He was leading, truly leading, in a way he had never envisioned possible. After the meeting concluded, he stepped back into the hallway with Evelyn, overwhelmed but invigorated. "That was incredible," she said, a spark of pride lighting her voice. "You not only handled the pressure, but you turned it into a dialogue. That's a leader." He could hardly contain the swell of gratitude. "We did it together. I couldn't have shown this side of me without your courage to reveal the truth. You saved more than my career. You saved the essence of who I am." In that moment, He understood the depth of their partnership. More than allies in a corporate battlefield, they were champions of each other's authenticity. Daniel had achieved what once felt unattainable. He had conquered the specters of doubt and emerged not just a businessman, but a leader in every sense of the word. A man whose journey of vulnerability had laid the foundation for a more interconnected and resilient future. With renewed conviction, Daniel turned to explore the path ahead, a world filled with possibilities, where he could redefine success on his own terms. It was a space that embraced growth through authenticity, and he was ready to step boldly into it, having not merely survived the threats, but having triumphed in the pursuit of his truth and the strength of community crafted through trust. This was just the beginning. The journey toward authentic leadership would continue to unfold, and he was excited to embrace every moment, every lesson, and every opportunity for connection that lay ahead. And as for Evelyn, she had become not just a valuable ally, but an integral part of the transformative journey he was now on. Together, they would forge a future grounded in authenticity, resilience, and mutual respect. Principles that would elevate not only their professional lives, but foster a deeper understanding of each other as individuals. Daniel smiled, filled with satisfaction, no longer haunted by his past, but encouraged by the promise of what was to come. You need to subscribe now to witness the unfolding of more exclusive emotional stories. This is the moment to show your support. Your thumbs up will feed the algorithm and bring these transformative tales to life. Don't wait even one more second. Comment your reactions and theories about Daniel's journey, and share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see how true transformation is achieved. Join us, for every real fan of personal overcoming stories understands the importance of these actions.